Alright, so this is going to be What If Deku Had Imagine Breaker Part 1. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
They took it to 10.
Let me tell you how I come through with the 1-2, kicking shit like kung fu. Treat a bad bitch like she average. I'm a savage, little hoe, what you want do? I'm about cash if the raw fast. I'ma get that little nigga by any means.
Alright, so before I get into the what if, I would like to do this kind of announcement. So first off, I'm going to start this YouTube kind of group called The Sins, based off the anime 7 Deadly Sins. So this group is kind of try to like collaborate with each other and just help everyone who's in it kind of grow together. So right now, there's 6 open slots right now, and then each person who joins would represent the different sin. For example, I chose the sin of greed, since Bond is my favorite character and it's also my profile picture. So if you join, if you want to join, tell me down in the comments below, and link me one of your best videos. So the only qualifications to join this kind of group is you just need to be like a what if YouTuber and somewhat post consistently. Like, it doesn't have to be daily like I do. It could just be like once a week or even 2 weeks. You just have to upload within that time frame, right? And you just have to be a what if YouTuber. So if you have the idea of joining my kind of group, then you could just tell me down below, comment down your YouTube name, and then link me one of your best videos, and then follow me on Twitter and DM me if you want a kind of profile picture similar to mine, things like that, right? So with that being said, let's get into the actual what if. So in this kind of power, the Imagine Breaker, what it does is it's from a certain magical index, and basically the main character has this ability in his right arm that basically whenever he touches something that's a superpower, in their universe they call them Esper powers, right? Because they have like psychic powers, and then magic as well. So anything he touches, he basically nullifies their power. Okay? And this works on projectiles. In some certain projectiles it works if it's relating to that kind of power. Like, let's say you shoot lightning, he'd be able to touch it and he'd be able to nullify it. And if he's touching the person who's shooting that lightning, then they wouldn't be able to use any of their powers. So it's basically like Aizawa's quirk, but it also affects him as well. So there was a scene in the anime where they try to heal the main character with magic, but since he had Imagine Breaker, it didn't work because it would just nullify the spell. So for this, we're gonna say that for things like that, it's only gonna affect, it's going to affect the rest of his body except for his arm. Like, let's say he has a bunch of like how Deku smashes the 0 pointer, but then he has like a bunch of broken bones. So basically every bone in his body would break, or like how it usually does in the anime. But when he goes to get healed, everything would heal up except for his right arm. Okay, so that's the kind of ground rules that we're going to go with. So early on in Deku's life, they don't know what his quirk is, but they know his mother starts questioning things because whenever like Deku's like, whenever she's with Deku and he's like touching her, she's not able to use her quirk, so she doesn't know why. So by the time they get to the doctor, that they had that doctor's appointment, they figure out that he's actually able to nullify quirks if he touches them with his right arm. So Deku, he is kind of disappointed in a way because he wanted something like All Might, since it's very like flashy in the way that he, fights villains and stuff like that. But he's still happy that it gets a quirk. So when he gets back to school the next day, he tells Bakugo that his quirk was, I don't know what they would call it. Let's just say they call it Imagine Breaker. And he says, he tells him that his quirk is Imagine Breaker and he's actually able to nullify quirks. And Bakugo will be like, oh yeah, prove it. And this is when Deku would just like touch him on the shoulder and he'd be like, alright, try to use your quirk now. And Bakugo would try his hardest, but he just couldn't be able to do it. So Bakugo would be like, wow, that's pretty cool, but it's not really flashy. You could be a pretty good hero for like certain villains. You could be kind of like Eraserhead, which at this point he's not super well known since that's how he likes it, but some people would know. People know about his existence, right? He's not like some nobody, right? So growing up, Deku would train a lot physically because he knows he has a quirk that's not physically based. So he would train a lot more to become physically stronger, right? And I think he would learn how to use some martial arts. You guys can tell me what kind specifically, but I think he would use something that uses his, hands, right? Because that's how his quirk works. So he's not really bullied as a kid. He's still friends with Bakugo, and he's kind of there as the role to kind of keep Bakugo from losing his temper and calming him down, since he's able to like stop his quirk and things like that, right? So I think Bakugo in general would be slightly less of a hothead than he is in the anime, just a little bit. So we get to the day where Deku actually meets the slime villain, or the sludge villain. So what happens here is that instead of going his normal route, Deku actually decides to go the shortcut. And as he's going under this bridge, he hears some sort of rumbling throughout the sewer, and this is when the slime villain actually attacks and goes around him and kind of surrounds him and tries to get into his mouth. But this is when this weird sound activates, right? So whenever Imagine Breaker nullifies a magic or a Esper power, it makes like this weird kind of horn noise, but it's kind of like, it's like this synth noise, a synth horn, I could best describe it. You could just look it up. Just look up any fight from a certain magical index with Toga in it. Yeah, I think it was Toga. Or Toma, I'm not sure. I forgot his name. But basically, yeah. So what would happen is when the slime touched his right arm, he wouldn't like become human, but his sludge would just fall on the ground and he would lose control. So that's how it would work. So Deku, since the slime is getting less and less strength as more slime gets nullified, Deku would be able to get out, and he would just kind of have this like small puddle where the slime is, and he would just have his arm in it so that he can't really have control. So this is when All Might actually appears and actually tells him, I am here. And he would look at this kid kind of like touching the slime, like, hey kid, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, All Might, I can't believe you're here, since he's still a fanboy. This villain just attacked me and I was able to nullify his quirk. And he's like, oh, nullify it, huh? You're kind of, so you can nullify quirks. And he's like, yeah. So you're kind of like a Eraserhead in that sense. And Deku would take this as a compliment, since he would look up to Eraserhead very much because they have similar quirks. So, in this one, he would give, they would still put it in the bottle, and he would sign his notebook. And I think Deku would still be somewhat insecure, even though he has a quirk, because it's not flashy and it's not really combat oriented necessarily. So what would happen is Deku would kind of, as All Might is trying to leave, this is when All Might or Deku would grab onto his leg using his right arm, right? And this would turn All Might back into his Small Might form, and he would like kind of fall after like a few feet. And he's like, "Kid, why did you do that?" He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, All Might. I just really wanted to." And then he realizes that All Might shrank, and he's like, "All Might, what are you? Some sort of imposter?" And then All Might would say no. And this is when he explains his scar and everything about it. So, this is when, Deku still asks All Might if he could be a hero, even though his quirk isn't, combat oriented, like I said. And he would say, of course, there's heroes like Eraserhead that could do things like this, so of course you could be a hero. And Deku is crying at this point because his idol just said that, yeah, he could become a hero. And this is when All Might jumps away to the next building, and the slime still leaves, but it doesn't go. It takes a while for it to get to Bakugo, since they didn't lose it halfway there. They left. He only escaped only like a couple 100 feet, I guess, or a couple yards away. You know what I mean? Since when All Might jumped with Deku, he didn't go as far as he usually would because of Imagine Breaker. So Deku would just try to walk home, pretty excited. And this is when he actually hears explosions and fire, and this is when Bakugo is actually getting attacked by the slime villain. So knowing this, Deku would run between the crowds through the fire and actually get to Bakugo. Or he wouldn't know it's Bakugo until he got right up, and he was like, "Oh my gosh, Kachan, I can't believe you're getting attacked." And this is when he would use his Imagine Breaker to kind of nullify the slime villain, right? So it's a lot more of a peaceful, or it's a lot of an easier resolution. And as this is all happening, this is All Might's looking at all this happening. So All Might considers Deku to be one of the candidates to get One for All. So you guys can tell me down below if you want it to be Deku or someone else. So tell me that down below. So yeah. So all the heroes are excited, and they're like, "Wow, this kid's amazing. What's your quirk, kid?" And Deku would explain like, "Oh, my quirk is Imagine Breaker. I have the ability to nullify quirks with my right arm." And people were like, "Wow, that's a pretty impressive quirk." And I could tell, they'd be like, "I could tell that you've been training, because he'd be more muscular than he is in the anime." So that would be a factor into him getting praised. So Deku would feel very, excited and happy that this is happening. And if I didn't mention before, he remembers in the classroom, people were kind of skeptical that he would make it into UA, since his quirk isn't, it's only like, it's really limited, right? But Bakugo knew that Deku could make it in. So as he's walking towards his house, this is when Bakugo goes behind him and says, "Hey man, thanks for the save." And he gives him like a piece of gum, just how he does in the anime, and he leaves. And as Deku continues to walk home, this is when All Might comes through and basically says, "Hey kid, do you want to be my successor?" He does that kind of entire speech as he does in the anime, but not about the part about him being quirkless, right? So with that being said, I think I'll end it here, and then in the next part we'll go through the entry exams and the quirk assessment and the hero versus villains and stuff like that, right? So You guys can tell me down below if you want to join the group Sins, and if you are, tell me down below, and then DM me on Twitter to get the more details, right? So with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. So yeah,